Great. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start shortly. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, PEBT Update, an overview of latest guidance. My name is Kelsey Boone, and I am a Child Nutrition Policy Analyst at the Food Research and Action Center. Just some quick housekeeping. A recording of this webinar will be available after the presentation. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function to send them to the panelists. So as I said before, this is FRAC's webinar, PEBT Update and Overview of Latest Guidance, hosted with USDA's FNS. So as we know, Pandemic-EBT has been a lifeline for millions of families who have lost jobs, wages, and access to school meals during the pandemic. A study released a few weeks ago by the Brookings Institution on the impact of the Pandemic-EBT benefits provided for the 2020-2021 school year found a 17% decrease in low food insecurity among children in SNAP households. In addition, PEBT reduced food insufficiency among SNAP households by 28%. By giving families the money to replace meals that students miss while schools are operating normally, we can ensure that nutrition gaps do not widen as a result of COVID-19 and children remain fed. During today's webinar, we will be hearing from representatives from USDA on details of the guidance recently released for the Pandemic-EBT program for school year 2021 to 2022. USDA will also be answering some questions at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Jana DePorter from the Food and Nutrition Services to talk about the guidance.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jana DePorter, and I am a program analyst with Child Nutrition at FNS, and I am on the National Office PEBT team. I want to start off by thanking you for joining us for today's webinar, as well as your continued work in support of PEBT. This webinar will cover the recently released guidance with a focus on the new content covered in the Q&A. So let's start off with PEBT in school year 21-22. So as with last year, PEBT is available during this school year for any state with schools or childcare facilities that remain closed or operating at reduced attendance or hours due to COVID. PEBT eligibility is based on the federal public health emergency declaration in response to COVID-19, and state and local declarations do not govern the availability of PEBT benefits. States must submit new plans for USDA review and approval before they can issue PEBT benefits this school year. Although some states may anticipate having no need for PEBT during the school year, USDA encourages all states to have updated plans on file in case conditions change. PEBT requirements for school year 21-22 will be the same as the requirements during school year 2020. Next slide. Although PEBT program rules and the process of plan review and approval have not changed, the conditions on the ground have changed since last year. More schools will return to full-time in-person learning during this school year. These changes will impact the administration of PEBT. For example, USDA anticipates fewer children will be eligible for PEBT during this school year. States and schools will need to carefully consider the different methods of virtual instruction and their respective PEBT eligibility or non-eligibility. And states may want to modify their approach to identifying children eligible for PEBT childcare benefits. And as you'll note there in our Q&A document, we list, which was put out a few months ago, these are the Q's and A's that correspond to those points. And we encourage you to look at that Q&A if you haven't already, and that is on our FNS PEBT website. Okay, next slide. So there are 3 eligibility criteria that must be met in order for children to be eligible for benefits. One, as we've said already, there is a federal public health emergency designation based on SARS-CoV-2 in place, which is COVID-19. Second, the child would have received free or reduced price school meals under the NSLP and SBP if not for the COVID health emergency. A child must meet income eligibility requirements or be enrolled in a community eligibility provision school or a school operating under provisions 2 or 3. And the child does not receive a free or reduced price meal at the school because the school is closed or has been operating with reduced attendance or hours for at least 5 consecutive days due to the COVID emergency in the current school year. Because schools are permitted to operate the seamless summer option and did not collect new NSLP applications at the beginning of the school year, states are again permitted to base children's eligibility on the free and reduced price eligibility data from the most recent prior year where an eligibility status is available, as discussed in question 11 of the Q&A. Like last year, schools must offer newly eligible households an opportunity to be determined eligibility through the normal application process. Just one note, if, however, a school or school district returns to collecting applications at the start of the school year for the purposes of returning to normal NSLP operations, those applications and not a prior year's application must be used to determine PEBT eligibility. Unlike last year, it may not make sense for states and school districts to consider eligibility for households that are newly determined eligible back to the beginning of the school year. This flexibility was appropriate last year when PEBT for the school year was not in place until the start of the school year. USDA did not consider issuing benefits retroactive to the beginning of school year 21-22 as necessary or appropriate. States may continue to assume eligibility as it did in school year 2021 or limit eligibility to begin at the time of application. USDA does believe that the submission date of an application is the best indicator at the start of a child's eligibility for PEBT this school year. One question that we heard from states is what counts as reduced attendance or hours? This is well fleshed out in number 8, but the question is, if a school has returned to in-person instruction, but the school continues to provide virtual instruction for COVID-related reasons at the election of the student or the student's family, is that school operating at reduced attendance? So if the school is providing its own virtual instruction to students on an exception basis for COVID-related reasons, and virtual instruction will be provided by school or school district staff or contract staff hired by the school, then the school is considered operating at reduced attendance. A virtual day may count for PEBT eligibility when the school attended by the child is closed or completely virtual due to COVID-19, and the school could have received free or reduced priced meals at the school except for the school closure or reduced operations. So if a virtual or hybrid schedule is imposed on students, children are eligible for PEBT for the days they are learning virtually. This is the same as last year. If schools have returned to in-person learning and students have an option to elect to learn virtually, They are eligible for PEBT if the school's virtual instruction is provided by the school or school district staff or contract staff hired by the school. Virtual days are not eligible for PEBT if the school attended by the child is a distinct, fully virtual institution that is not eligible to participate in the NSLP or the SBP. This includes virtual academies, whether administered by the state or the school district, since these schools are not eligible to participate in the NSLP. Students attending a state-administered or school district-administered virtual academy could not receive free or reduced price NSLP meals from the school in the absence of a COVID emergency. The NSLP status of the virtual school, rather than its relationship to the student's home district, is the critical factor for the purposes of PEBT. Next slide. Actually, sorry, you can go back. There, thank you. As with last year, states have the option to use simplifying assumptions to calculate PEBT benefits. Once again, the state may calculate a fixed monthly benefit for fully virtual students at eligible schools by taking the number of scheduled instructional days in the state school calendar, a number that excludes school breaks and holidays, and dividing that number by the number of months in the school year. The state may calculate a uniform PEBT benefit for children with hybrid schedules based on average hybrid schedules or the most common hybrid schedule in the state or in a local area that is a reasonable reflection of the scheduled virtual days for eligible children. The state may calculate a uniform PEBT benefit for all eligible children at the school level, if appropriate, based on the default or predominant learning model. However, due to changing conditions this school year, where schools have returned to full-time in-person instruction, a school-level predominant model may be insufficiently sensitive to limited closures at the class or grade level. Instead of denying benefits to the minority of students affected by a limited school closure, states should consider developing PEBT plans that issue common benefits for limited closures at the grade or class level. And we do want to emphasize again that the statute does provide for 100% reimbursement of administrative costs, which can be used to help determine these benefit levels at a more granular level if that's appropriate. Next, we're going to talk about the childcare component of PEBT. So again, the eligibility requirements for childcare PEBT remain the same. There is a public health emergency based on COVID in place. The child is a member of a household that is enrolled in SNAP. The child is enrolled in a covered childcare facility, and under that December 2020 amendment to the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, all children under the age of 6 will be considered enrolled in a covered childcare facility. And the child's covered childcare facility is closed or has reduced attendance or hours for at least 5 consecutive days, resulting in the child's inability to attend the facility, or one or more schools in the area of the childcare facility or in the area of the child's residence is closed or has reduced attendance or hours for at least 5 consecutive days. Children under the age of 6 who receive SNAP benefits are not automatically eligible for PEBT. They are only deemed enrolled in a covered childcare facility. The other requirements still must be met. Children who turn 6 before schools return to session are not necessarily ineligible for PEBT childcare benefits. However, they are not deemed enrolled in a covered childcare facility. In order to issue benefits to these children, the state may use the best feasibly available data to verify their enrollment in a covered childcare facility. The facility must be closed or operating at reduced attendance or hours, or located in the area of a school operating at reduced attendance or hours. When a child turns 6, the child is no longer deemed enrolled in a covered childcare facility. However, many of these children are enrolled in a covered childcare facility. USDA understands the challenges associated with contacting the families of these children once they turn 6 to confirm their enrollment in a covered child care facility as a condition of continued receipt of PEBT benefits. In these cases, states may make the reasonable simplifying assumption that the children who began receiving benefits as a 5-year-old earlier in the school year remain enrolled in a covered child care facility through the end of the school year. This will allow for the uninterrupted issuance of benefits to these children. It is important to note, however, that this assumption only applies to the child's continued enrollment in child care. The state may not assume continued SNAP enrollment through the end of the school year. PEBT child care benefits end when SNAP enrollment ends. So for this one, I'd encourage you to review question number 29 in the Q&A document, but just as a high-level overview of that, the purpose of the FFCRA's child care component is to provide assistance to children whose access to childcare and childcare meals is compromised by the COVID health emergency. USDA believes it would be counter to PEBT's purpose to issue a broad PEBT childcare benefit to the area's SNAP-enrolled preschool children if all but a few students in the area have returned to school for full-time in-person instruction. If states do elect to issue PEBT childcare benefits under minimal reduced attendance at schools, USDA encourages them to target benefits consistent with the best available data on local access to childcare and school operating status at an amount that is consistent with the near normal access to schools and childcare. In some states, counties, and school districts, schools have resumed normal in-person instruction, but childcare providers continue to operate with reduced attendance or hours. How should states identify the children who remain eligible for PEBT childcare benefits in those states and localities? So states may use data from individual facilities, or they may use other evidence to establish eligibility for an entire locality or region. States may point to the continued existence of state or local ordinances that establish standards for safe operation. However, those ordinances are only appropriate if they mandate rather than recommend a reduction in capacity or hours. States may also point to administrative data on childcare enrollment or CACFP meal claims to support a claim that access to childcare remains compromised. However, that data must show a reduction in attendance due to COVID. Finally, the state must provide evidence that the data reflects a lack of access to childcare tied to the COVID health emergency. And lastly, just wanted to go over what the new benefits amounts are. So please note that this is the maximum amount each child can receive each day. They may not receive a benefit under the school and childcare portions of the plan. So states will be expected to describe in their plan how they will ensure that no child receives PEBT benefits in excess of the maximum amount. So in the contiguous United States, that's going to be $7.10 a day. In Alaska, it'll be $11.44. And in Hawaii, Guam, Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, it will be $8.28. And I believe after this, we are going to open it up for questions. And I am joined by my colleagues at the National Office. We've got Ed Harper, Gary Tremblay, Shelley Pierce, and Lynn Rogers.
Overview, Jana. So I'm going to kick off the questions, starting with a question about school year 2020-2021, and wondering if you could give us a brief update on what plans have not been submitted, what states have not submitted their plans for under 6 and summer 2021.
Well, I'll start, give Jen a chance to get a drink. So, what we have is on our website a list of states that have been approved for the summer and for the previous school year. At some point, that list is going to be the same. It's a list of states that have submitted plans. But if we're still working on with a couple of states on plans that they've submitted, we don't want to undercut the process of working with that state. There's you know, and to say that states are not going to submit a plan is something that we just don't know. States may just not have done it yet. So at this point, we would just point you to the website that shows the states with approved plans. And there are relatively few that don't have approved plans for the summer or for last school year for childcare.
All right, we'll move on to the next question, which is, will PEBT include charter schools who are in the process of applying to the NSLP and have yet to be approved, or any other schools that are applying to the state to operate school breakfast or school lunch?
I'll let Janet take the next one. But for this one, schools have to be participating in the NSLP. The question about here is if schools are preparing to apply to participate in the NSLP, once they are approved and are participating in the NSLP, then the kids in those schools are potentially PEBT eligible.
So the next question is about virtual institutions. We were just wondering if you could provide some clarity around the virtual institution language. For example, there was a district that set up an opt-in virtual academy, which is run by the district, but is not technically a part of a specific school within the district. This is an important option for families who are more at risk to COVID, and these students would not be opting into the virtual academy if not for the pandemic. So shouldn't those students be eligible for PEBT benefits?
Right. Before I let this one fall in Janet's lap, I'll start. This is one that we anticipated would be, you know, a sensitive issue for states and for families. But the standard is reasonably clear, right? It's very clear, in fact, in the statute that the schools that are approved to participate in the NSLP, schools or sites that are approved to participate in the NSLP, is the same as a set of schools and sites that may issue PEBT benefits to the kids attending those sites. The states, I know that are attendees on this webinar are not all state officials, in fact, not mostly state officials, but the states understand the distinction between the schools and sites that are NSLP eligible and those that are not. We can certainly work with any non-state attendee to this webinar, but also, you know, with any state if there are gray areas that you'd like to discuss. But basically, the standard is if you're an NSLP participating site or school, then that school would also be eligible to issue PEBT benefits.
Okay, so because PEBT hasn't been approved for the 2021-2022 school year in any state thus far, is USDA considering amending the retroactivity of benefits language? Currently, if a district is shut down for 2 weeks due to COVID in September and a student applies for free or reduced price meals when their state is approved for PEBT, because most are receiving free meals through SFSP and may not need to submit until that point, shouldn't they be considered to receive benefits for September?
So I think what I would say is I would point the person asking about this to question, sorry, what number was this? I know Ed might have them all memorized at this point, but I don't quite yet. I believe it's question 12. So we would say that it is most appropriate to use the date of application, but it is up to the state how they will do retroactivity. So in that question number 12, we say that states may continue to assume eligibility as it did in school year 2021 or limit eligibility to begin at the time of the application. So that is up to the state and their plan.
I would just throw in one more thing. This question wasn't entirely clear to me, but if the question is asking something a little bit different and whether a state doesn't get its plan in place, let's say until December, but there were school closures back in September, are those school closures potentially PEBT eligible days? And the answer is yes. There's no reason that the timing of approval of a state's plan would affect eligibility, even if it is eligibility for days that have already passed.
For example, we've approved plans very late into school year 2021, even past the end of the school year 2021, and states were able to issue benefits back to the beginning of the school year. So yes, that continues to be, you can get benefits back to the beginning of the school year for the school year 21-22 plan.
So the next question is, if the state has not been approved or started implementing its summer pandemic EBT program, can families apply to receive those benefits?
So each state did set, so to be eligible for the summer PEBT benefits, for the school children, they would have needed to be enrolled in an NSLP participating school at the end of school year 2021, meaning that they didn't, leave the school early or graduate early. They were there through the end of the year, and then they needed to be free or reduced priced eligible. So they could establish their income eligibility during the school year or during the covered summer period. At this point, the summer period is over. It was primarily between June to August, although states could determine a kind of a due date for families to submit a free and reduced price application during the summer to be considered income eligible for the summer period. But at this point, if a state is still needing to submit a summer PEBT plan, then the application date for their free or reduced price meal application would need to have been prior to the start of the instructional school year for school year 21-22. So at this point, it is kind of past that, that time period.
And the only thing I would add here is that whenever I see the word application, right, that's an ambiguous term in the PEBT world. And what Janice said is exactly right? If there are families who had not yet established that they were eligible for free or reduced price meals, and the school or the state had an application period to fill out an NSLP meal application during the summer period, that period is over. But there are some other states that refer to PEBT applications in a different way, right? And those are states that have opened up sort of a template to fill out contact information in order to establish an EBT file, case file. That's not an application to establish eligibility, and there are states that have kept that application open beyond the end of the summer, and that's fine. And if states had a deadline for that type of application just to submit your contact information for setting up an EBT file, and that has already closed, and they want to reopen that because parents didn't take advantage of it, that's something that USDA would consider in approving as an amendment. But what has passed, and this is clear in our guidance too, again, I point to the Q&As. I think those are, I can give you a couple of numbers. Q&As number 4 and 5. Number 5, I'm sorry, Q&A number 5 talks about this in particular, the two different kinds of applications. So if anyone takes a look at that and still has a question, we're obviously happy to speak with you one-on-one.
So the next question is, FNS guidance says current year free and reduced price applications must be used if a school is collecting them for the purposes of returning to normal NSLP operations. What if schools are continuing to operate under the seamless summer option waiver and are collecting free reduced price eligibility information for other reasons, e.g. for state funding tied to the number of high need students, can prior year data on free or reduced price eligibility still be used?
We want to be careful not to give the wrong advice to a very, important, the exact situation here matters, right? So if schools are operating SFO and they're not undertaking their normal NSLP application process, because they wouldn't, right? Then they can use last year's free and reduced price eligibility list. For schools that are returning to counting and claiming this year, and there are some, right? They have returned to their normal application process at the beginning of this year. In those states or school districts, those new applications then become the basis for PEBT eligibility. And then there's this third group, which is also in our Q&As. Not all students were enrolled in school the previous year, right? So there's a necessity for every school to offer some kind of application process, free or reduced price meal application process. For families of children who are new to the school system, kindergartners, jump out at just the most obvious example there, but there are others too. So there's that application process. And then finally, I think the specific question here is if schools are collecting some kind of free or reduced price data that's not part of the NSLP application process, that's something that you should contact your state, or if it's a state asking a question, contact us, and we'll talk to you about the specifics of that. But that process is not the same as an NSLP application process, where all families have notice and expectation of applying for benefits. So it's a tough question to answer sort of in hypothetical. It would really be something that we should talk about separately with the questioner.
Next question is, what should a family do if they were certified for free meals but didn't receive benefits either in the summer or last school year?
They should either reach out to their school district or they should reach out to their state agency. Each state, I think, in their plans, and correct me if I'm wrong, had to have some sort of way for people to contact them. So they would need to contact, the help desk of the state agency that's running the PEBT program.
Their question is, if the public health emergency is declared over before this school year ends, will PEBT benefits end at that time or at the end of the school year?
Now, once the public health emergency is over, that's one of the basic requirements in the statute for PEBT. So obviously, don't forget too, right? We're talking about a process where states are likely to be issuing benefits retroactively. That doesn't mean that retroactive issuance of benefits would end. It just means that benefits from the end of the public health emergency forward would end.
So if a state has not been approved or started implementing its summer, oh wait, we already answered that. Sorry about that. Could you clarify what you meant by USDA encourages states to point to the very reasonable need to limit state and local administrative costs? That's part of one of the questions.
Right. Let me start that one. Just that's part of a much longer question in our Q&As. It's Q&A number 34, in case anyone wants to take a look at that. And that question had to do with states' use of simplifying assumptions, where the state is issuing some kind of average benefit, just like last year, right? States issued average hybrid benefits for children with hybrid schedules. Just about every state did that. And that question, Q&A number 34, is saying, what should states do to communicate to parents why they are getting a benefit that's not tied very specifically to their number of virtual learning days? And that's something where the answer to that Q&A says the state, there are certain good reasons for why the state was approved to issue an average benefit instead of a really precise benefit. And among those reasons might be, this is just one of a list of reasons. One of the reasons might be because the cost of doing something much more precise was prohibitive. But that shouldn't be interpreted to mean that if a state is asking this question, that you know, the administrative cost is sort of an absolute bar to issuing a precise benefit amount. Again, if a state is asking this question, we would refer them to other Q&A items on the appropriate use of simplifying assumptions in the Q&A document. Anyway, we're happy to talk to any state in depth about any of this.
So the next question has to do with administrative funding, and it is, can states still amend their administrative funding budgets for the 2020-2021 school year or summer of 2021?
Do you want me to take that, Ed?
That would be great.
Okay, so FNS has some limited ability to accommodate well-documented upward adjustments of fiscal year 2021 PEBT state administrative costs. So states should be advised that the determining factor as to which year a cost should be charged is based on the year in which the cost was incurred. So if states need an upward adjustment for fiscal year 21, that upward adjustment and the supporting documentation would need to show that there were costs in fiscal year 21. And if that's the case, they can contact their respective regional office. I will note that there will also be funding and for administrative costs under state PEBT administrative costs in fiscal year 22. But keeping in mind with what I said about incurring the costs in a specific year, if a state incurs costs to issue retroactive benefits for fiscal year 21, the activity to issue those retroactive benefits, the salaries associated with that, occur in fiscal year 22, then those costs may be charged to fiscal year 22. So again, yes, in limited circumstances, they have to be well documented, well supported. States should reach out to their regional offices if that's the case, and the documentation has to clearly show that the costs were for activity that was incurred in fiscal year 2021.
Next question is, my state has not been approved for summer benefits. Is there anything I can do?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Sorry, I'm gonna stop my video. So the question is, my state has not been approved for summer benefits. Is there anything I can do?
I think they would need to, they would need to contact their state agencies and encourage them to apply. I can't think of much of anything beyond that. Ed, would you have anything? I think that's pretty much it.
Right. This is where we hesitate to say whether a state has ruled out applying, submitting a summer plan or not, because we just don't know whether states have ruled that out. So definitely contact your state. If there's not an approved plan for your state, the only recourse you have at this point is to reach out to your state and talk to them.
Okay, moving on to a question we just received. To clarify an earlier question asked, FNS guidance says free and reduced price meal applications submitted after the state begins its school year 21-22 PEBT program cannot be given retroactive eligibility as they did in school year 2020-2021. Could a state that doesn't receive an approved PEBT plan for school year 21-22 until December 2021, for example, be able to grant retroactive eligibility back to the beginning of the school year for any students who apply before the date of the state's plan approval?
Well, I think the first part of that question just isn't right? I don't think we said that. Again, we're talking about retroactive sort of the retroactive eligibility of families versus issuing benefits for months prior to the state's approval of their plan. Those are two different things, right? There's a Q&A that Jana presented in the presentation. I think it's number 11 or 12.
Yeah, 12.
Right, and that does address families who have not yet established their eligibility for free or reduced price meals. The states have some discretion there in retroactive assumption of eligibility back prior to the date of application. But as far as the plan itself, if a state doesn't get its plan approved until December, that does not mean in any case, in any state, that benefits for the months of August, September, October, November are not available. All those months are PEBT eligible months. It doesn't matter that the state's plan isn't approved until after those months have passed.
Okay. I think this is the last question I have right now, unless I receive more, but this one is, are there any best practices from the 2020-2021 school year that would encourage us to that you would encourage us to consider as we develop our state plan for this school year?
So I know we got a few suggestions from our SNAP side of the house. One of the things that they encouraged is that states, when they're thinking of like their issuance schedules, that they look at staggering and splitting issuances. So staggering is not giving everybody who's due to receive the benefits the benefit on the same day, and splitting is dividing the benefit up into smaller portions. So, say your school year plan doesn't get approved until March 2022. So instead of, giving out the full year's worth of benefits, then splitting the benefits into 2 or 3 issuances would be advisable. And then I think as much as possible in terms of, your communication strategy, the issuance, like how you plan your issuances, things like that. If you can use what you used in school year 2021 and it worked, that's great, and you should continue to consider using that for school year 21-22.
Jana, can I also suggest one?
Yeah, of course.
So one of the things I'd like to suggest is that states try to submit their FNS 366A spending plan submissions a little bit earlier in the year. I think as states are developing and working with the state PEBT implementation plan work group to get their overall larger plans developed, many of them may have misunderstood the timing and put those in and thought maybe that covered the FNS 366A spending plan that addressed administrative cost. And so we didn't see them until, goodness, like maybe sometimes July, August. And I think that created confusion for some of the state agencies where they thought, well, wait a minute, we've been negotiating this. We submitted our plan, 8 months ago. Where are our administrative costs? But administrative costs and the grants that go out that address those costs are covered by that FNS 366A spending plan submission. So while clearly there needs to be a connection between the two documents, the sooner states can get that in this year, the more quickly they can be funded for those administrative costs. So that would just be a recommendation I would make, not to hold on to those until the latter part of the year, as there sometimes is some conversations and clarifications that need to happen.
And I would also add, on the topic of administrative funds, use your administrative funds to the fullest extent that you need to develop your plans. A lot of the program is based on what is the best feasibly available data, not what is the data that you have. And sometimes getting from the what we have to what's best feasibly available data requires funding, and that is, you can get reimbursement for that. So encourage state agencies to use their administrative funds to the fullest extent.
Another question came in. Our state requires an application. Can you provide them guidance and support to move to direct issuance?
So I will say that, there are different reasons why a state might use an application. We do work with, each state and state agency to figure out the best way for them to quickly and efficiently deliver benefits to eligible families. And so while we encourage the use of direct issuance where possible, there are some states that need to use an application, and we will work with them to make sure that those applications are as easy to fill out as possible and less burdensome for families.
Right, and what states are telling us, right, that do have an application process where the application, again, is basically just collecting the contact information to establish an EBT file. The reason that states are doing that is because they're struggling with returned mail. So getting benefits to families, is the end goal, of course, to any state that has created an application process like that. And like Jana said, direct issuance is definitely preferred where that's, where that's doable. But if the alternative is, too much return mail, the benefits aren't getting to the families either. So, we do defer to the state on what is going to be the most efficient way to get benefits to families. And for those concerned, right, that the application process, even if it is just to collect contact information for getting benefits in the mail, that is, yes, we all recognize, right, that is one more step that families have to take to get benefits. And that's not ideal. But the states do have the ability to keep those application periods open for, for right now we're talking about, we're at the beginning, reasonably near the beginning of the school year. So keeping the application open for the entire school year is not the issue. But even for last summer, if the application period for gathering contact information has ended, we've already approved, and we did this last year as well, approved state amendments to reopen those processes, those application processes, just to collect the contact information for families who've already been determined free or reduced price eligible. States can do that and have done that.
The next question is, can administrative funds be used to build infrastructure, e.g. a new data exchange system for future PEBT or summer EBT in issuances?
None of us is jumping to answer that question. That one, obviously the details matter here, and we would have to have an in-depth conversation with the state on that. Obviously, the PEBT benefit administrative funding provision is to administer the benefits, the current benefits, not to develop a process for a future program. But that doesn't mean that there aren't uses for a longer term investment that would also facilitate delivery of benefits for this school year. Lynn, did I say anything inappropriate there?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's a difficult question to answer without having the details and understanding how it relates to the overall approved implementation plan. So I think you answered it exactly how I would have.
All right, the next question is, can states set up a state school meal application to support schools?
Again, this is the use of the word application is, I think, in this case, reasonably clear. If we're talking about an application for free or reduced price NSLP eligibility, there are plenty of states now that have statewide applications for free or reduced price school meals. Other states do not have such an application. States that don't have a statewide application for free or reduced price school meals, ideally, determining children's eligibility for free reduced price meals should remain with the entity that does that on a year-to-year basis, which is the school districts themselves, not the state. But again, we're happy to talk to any state on that particular question to get a little bit more detail.
Next question is, can our LCFF form be used as student approval since we are not using NSLP applications this year? I'm assuming that's referring to a form that's not a free reduced price meal application form. Yes.
And we're not sure. I think we would want to take that one offline and talk get a little bit more detail about what that is and who's asking and what we can do to learn a little bit more about that.
I believe it is the California alternative income form. So yeah, we can have that person reach out. Let's see. So Lynn, you had talked about a form about administrative funding. I believe somebody asked what this form was, administrative form 360.
Yeah, the FNS 366A, we call it the FNS 366A spending plan. And it when we released the grant package last year that addressed the fiscal year 2021 state PEBT administrative costs, as part of that package, there was a form called an FNS 366A that needs to be completed, reflecting sort of the different categories that the estimated costs will fall in. And then additionally, there was a requirement that anything over a certain dollar amount be supported by narrative information to help explain some of the cost. And those are completed by the states, those FNS 366As.
All right. Are there any last questions from anyone in the chat or in the Q&A? Go ahead and submit now. Right. If there are no more questions, we will go ahead and wrap up. Brittany, do you mind putting up the resources slide? So this is just some of FRAC's PEBT outreach and communications materials. There's some links in here. If you go to frac.org/PEBT, we have a lot of different materials on the website that are available. And I really just want to thank the USDA and this entire team for coming on and speaking with us. We got a lot of great information, so thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.